Hi, welcome to the Eclectic Radical. This is Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. And tonight my guest is Mark Girdler, who is running for Decatur City Council in Decatur, Illinois, and who you can follow on Twitter at Guillotine Guy One.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mark. I'm sorry for getting your name wrong in my announcements. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay.
And please introduce yourself. Let the audience get to know you a little.
I'm Mark Girdler. I'm kind of known locally as the People's Mayor, but unfortunately, you can't run with a title on a ballot. So I went as the Guillotine Guy. A lot of news articles have been written about me as being the Guillotine Guy. I've advocated for bringing back the guillotine on the public corner many times. I've basically just been battling corruption at a city level. When I first started, I just thought maybe I could get some racists fired at the place that I was volunteering at. And as I looked into, FOIA requests and Open Meeting Act violations, I realized that it was a lot more than just a few people doing bad things. And I kind of got sucked into this whole world of battling the, local government.
Well, that's important work. We need more people to do it. So I want to thank you for that. We've got some good folks battling the local government here in the Portland area.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they even win one, which is nice.
Oh yeah.
And I know that one of the things we really need around the country is people who are willing and ready to fight the local government, because honestly, more than anything else, it's when we fight the local government that we have the best chance of winning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also important because local governments kind of have a way of freezing out outsiders, freezing out outside voices, because it's usually a small group of privileged people that have control over most of the decisions that are made. And I noticed when I first started getting started that people had done what I did before, but they were in a position where they had a financial stake in something, or pressure could be applied to them in some way, and they just kind of went away. Whereas I'm really poor, so there's not much they can do to me. So this is one of the few times, I guess, when being poor is kind of an advantage, if you can call it that.
Well, no, I know what you mean. I helped some people run for office in various places around the country in 2019 and 2020, mostly congressional primaries. And it's funny, some of the things that people do when you're running for Congress. One candidate was offered a vacant city council seat that was going to open up if he would drop out of the race.
Wow.
And endorse the city council president who was going to be vacating that seat to run for Congress.
Wow.
So that's just one example.
Yeah, local politics to me are just so, it's insane. I went to a meeting tonight, and a member of our city council literally said that it was a tough decision between human lives and commerce. And when I brought that up in the public comment, they told me I was an evil person for criticizing that I was evil, terrible, all this other stuff. They yelled, literally yelled at me from the city council thing. And people got up, business owners who've been defying the COVID guidelines here in town got up and apologized to this guy for, how I had treated him, because I questioned, with facts that, everything they're doing, it was just terrible. When you tell people openly that human lives, have a monetary value that you're willing to grind them up for, I think you should be criticized. But like tonight, they acted like I had, stormed the Capitol or something.
I don't understand how they say that you're evil after they put a monetary value on human life. I'm still wrapping my brain around that.
I agree completely.
It's funny, the things that people will tell themselves in order to stay successful, and they don't like outsiders breaking into the club. So
definitely not. I mean, our mayor said openly on the radio recently that she thought that because there are 13 candidates running, which kind of shows you that, when there's 3 seats and 13 candidates, people want change. But she said that people shouldn't be able to run unless they have a known name already or they have the money to buy TV ads, which I mean, that's just kind of that's a wild thing for an elected official to say.
If they have to have money to buy TV ads, well, you're disqualifying most of the population of most cities.
Mm-hmm.
If they have to have a known name, so maybe I'm understanding this wrong, but unless you're in a really big city like New York or Los Angeles, where city council is almost a bigger job than Congress, isn't city council usually the very first thing people run for in order to get known?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's harder, at least around here, to get on the county board than it is to get a city council seat. So I don't know where you would start from if it wasn't, if it wasn't there. I just think they're mad because we forced a primary and they were really unhappy about that because of the expenses, but they're not exactly thrifty with their money. So I don't feel for them. I think 100 people should be able to run if they want to.
Hey, well, no, I think that everyone who feels a need to run should be able to run. I don't think, especially early in a race, that people should try to pressure anyone to drop out. Late in a race, I suppose it depends. The only reason I can see to want anybody to drop out is if you have 3 people who would all be roughly equal and one awful person, and you just absolutely have to unite the vote to beat the awful person.
Yeah, agreed, for sure. Yeah. Luckily, in this case, we have there are really only 3 people that are even slightly left-leaning that are running, and one of them's a liberal. So at least if we can get those 3 in, we can unify against the libertarian and the right vote.
Even finding a liberal in Decatur is an accomplishment. If I understand Illinois' geography and culture properly.
Oh yeah, to say the least. Like a green conservative would probably pass for a liberal in Decatur, I think.
I could see that. I mean, a vaguely green conservative passed for a liberal for the National Party and got the nomination, right?
Yeah, it's a really strange town. It's like nobody likes the government, but they keep voting for the same people over and over again just because they teach their kids tennis, or they remember when they were on TV in the 1980s. Or maybe they remember when they played basketball in the 1970s.
Sounds like a smaller scale version of Mitch McConnell in Kentucky, where he repeatedly polls as the least popular senator in the country, but keeps winning re-election.
Yep.
It's like if his constituents really hate him so much, who's voting for him?
Right.
Of course, it probably doesn't help that we ran a candidate against Mitch who was trying to run closer to Trump and say, "Hey, I'll stop Mitch McConnell from blocking Trump's agenda." that sort of turns off all the voters in Kentucky who might be looking at a Democrat.
Right.
I'm not saying it's necessarily wise to attack Trump voters in a Kentucky election, but if you're trying to win as a Democrat, you can't try to run towards Trump.
Yep. Yeah, because you're never going to pull those votes anyway. So.
Yeah, no. And what's the thing about that? The only one of those candidates who won was Hickenlooper, and the only reason Hickenlooper won, even though he opposed it, it's really important to understand that he was very much anti-legal pot. But the reason Hickenlooper won is because pot was legalized while he was governor, and people remember that.
Yep.
They don't necessarily remember, except for a handful of people, that he opposed it.
Mm-hmm. I know I'll forever be grateful for Pritzker for making it legal in Illinois, like right as the pandemic started. That was definitely a great thing.
Well, yeah, if you've got to stay home, I guess that's the best timing possible.
Yep.
If only, if only he would do more to really stop evictions and
Yep.
utility shutoffs.
Mm-hmm. Well, they talked about that tonight at the city council, and I thought, wow, this is going really well, right? They want to help people with utility bills and rent, but they were talking about landlords. And I was like, oh, well, there goes that idea.
Well, someone should really suggest, because it's true, if you really want to help landlords, then you should really be pressing your congressperson entirely regardless of what party they belong to, because if they're not going to listen to the city governments in their constituency, they're not going to listen to anyone. You should be pressuring your congress people to tell them to pass a law paying people's rent if you want to help landlords.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that simple. The best way to help landlords is to help the people who are renting. Now,
I don't think that's how they see it, however.
No, here in Oregon, we have an eviction moratorium. And unlike the eviction moratoriums in some other states, I know a little bit about some of the exceptions to Pritzker's. Ours has enough teeth that whatever professional association landlords have around here is actually suing the state government over the eviction moratorium.
Wow. I think ours, at least from what I know, from what Alan's told me, there's a lot of loopholes. You got to jump through a lot of hoops. I mean, they're still shutting off water in Decatur, and they just put so many blockades in place, but then they're always quick to say shut off moratorium, but then they don't tell people the truth about how much of a struggle it is to get to the point to where and by that time you're probably shut off anyway.
Probably. I mean, and that's sort of the goal. One of the best ways to get people out of a house, if you can't evict them, is to shut something off that they need to survive, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
I got to ask, since you mentioned it, and I don't mean to set this out there as a landmine, what do you think of the antics in the Capitol the other day?
I think it's almost like a comedy skit or something. It's surreal to me. Like, these are the people who for months now, and I mean, even we had people locally who went to this, who organized bus trips to go to it. These are the people who were calling for Black Lives Matter protesters, for people that they viewed as Antifa or peaceful protesters, to be run over in the street. I can't even count how many death threats I've had on Facebook of people telling me they're going to spill my brains because I'm trying to help Planned Parenthood by counter protesting the forced birthers that are out there. And these are the law and order people, right? I mean, and they're with this cheap cosplay raiding the Capitol. I mean, it's just, and then trying to hang Mike Pence. That's like, what world or what timeline is this?
So, I mean, and this is where I do get frustrated when people call it a coup, because their plan was essentially to murder Congress people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's definitely terrorism. If they successfully killed anybody, that's definitely domestic terrorism. I won't argue with that. I don't like the terrorism label. I think that we call people terrorists because we want to single them out for different treatment than other criminals. And I think our treatment for criminals is bad enough already without singling people out for special treatment, even as criminals on top of that. But honestly, if you're going to call something terrorism, this is what you've got to call terrorism. But let's say they had been successful. They kill Mike Pence. They kill Nancy Pelosi. That doesn't actually change the composition of the government. We have to spend a little extra money on special elections. Trump has to use a constitutional amendment, and the House can't leave session because they've got to vote to confirm or not confirm his vice presidential nominee with only a few days left. And all sorts of stuff follows through on that. But Chuck Grassley still certifies the vote at the end of all that. And the inauguration still happens on schedule. None of what they were actually doing would overthrow the government or change the chain of events afterwards. So it's the sort of thing where you could tell that they didn't actually have a plan or an idea of what they were doing.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, well, I mean, if you look at their trajectory, I mean, it was built on such idiocy from the start, but I mean, I don't know, like they did what they wanted to do. And I think it ended up a massive failure on every possible front. I mean, it was, I don't know, but then again, I can't believe that there are people who would wake up one morning and be like, I'm going to go and put my life on the line for Donald Trump, or or any politician. Like, it's crazy to me.
So that's the whole thing. That's not what they thought they were doing. It's kind of weird. Did you hear any of the stupid things any of those people said?
I heard a lot of them.
Yeah. We just wanted to make sure Congress knew they worked for us by threatening to hang them.
By shitting in the hallways of Congress.
Now, I have to admit, excuse me, I have to admit, I thought stealing Nancy Pelosi's lectern was funny. I don't think that the quote unquote looting was really, I mean, heck, there's a reason they call it the people's capital. If they want to carry all that stuff out, I don't care. But the threats to kill people, and now I don't like cops. I'm the first person to say I don't like cops. But I saw the video of them beating people, and that didn't look good no matter who's getting beat. And I saw I saw the clip where the one lady says, "They're shooting at us. They're not supposed to shoot at us. They're supposed to shoot at Black Lives Matter."
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it goes to show, and I'm not singling out people from any part of the country when I say this, because these folks came from all over. One of them was a New York State Supreme Court judge's son from Brooklyn. So we are not talking about even all the rural country bumpkins that they want us to think of when they show the pictures that they show. But even beyond that, beyond the fact that they came from all over and they aren't just the sorts of people they want us to picture, which you probably understand very well, that it's just, it goes to show that we really don't teach civics anymore. People don't understand how any of this stuff works, and they are open to the most egregious lies from the most untrustworthy people because they don't know anything, and they're encouraged not to know anything, which bothers me even more.
And I think that we were kind of talking about how local politics are such a different animal, but I think that's a place where it really stands out as being different because so few people, at least here in Decatur, go to the city council meetings. It's normally just me and maybe there's a local libertarian that goes to a lot of the meetings.
Sure.
But when people show up, like they really feel like, hey, I'm doing this massive thing. I'm coming down here to speak to you on this, and you better vote the way I want to. But then they just drop it. They don't continue on. They really honestly believe that these people care what they have to say. I mean, I'm years into this, and I'm just now getting to where, I'm making a little bit of, progress and headway, but it's just people, if they go down there and they say, hey, we want you to do this, they'll just give them some, bullshit answer, and the people just be like, oh, well, that's the mayor, so they got to be telling the truth.
I know exactly what you mean. It's like in more innocent times when people used to say, "That's the president. The president wouldn't lie to us." Sadly, much more innocent times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, there are still people who think that way. The president wouldn't lie to us unless he's a Democrat, or the president wouldn't lie to
Right.
us unless he's a Republican.
He's a businessman. He can't be bought.
How could somebody whose only pursuit in life is to attempt to make their already large assets even larger, how could they ever be bought?
Yep. It's a wild line of thinking.
So, going with the idea that nobody can be bought, who do you think it was, and how much do you think it cost for the people who weren't bought, for Elon Musk to go to the richest man in the world so fast while everybody else gets sick and dies?
I'm still in a state of shock from that. My girlfriend told me that Elon Musk passed Jeff Bezos, and I was like, what? That can't be right. It was like 120 billion just in a real short amount of time. I don't even know how to process that. For what?
And well, so that's really the question, isn't it? It certainly wasn't Tesla. I doubt it was SpaceX.
Mm-hmm.
His tunnels under New York City aren't even close to generating any income yet, let alone being built. It's just, apparently his assets appreciated. Now, in layman's terms, for those of us who don't speak the way I forget and speak sometimes, that means the stuff he owned is worth more than it was before. That can be stock, that can be physical property, but it means that he may have only actually gained a small amount. We'll never know. But that what he already owned was driven up in value so intensely because of the economic consequences of everybody getting sick and dying, of him fighting to keep factories open while his employees were begging for paid leave.
I mean, it's I don't know. Like I said, I don't even know how to process it. I can't imagine so many people being like out of work and in food lines and evicted and for absolutely no reason, just kind of out of thin air from some weird financial algorithm. A guy's just given more money than any other human being has had certainly in our lifetimes. I don't even know. That's probably above my pay grade, I think.
I remember somebody did the math. I don't want to take the time to Google it and interrupt the conversation, so I won't. But somebody did the math once. And I could be wrong, but I believe that they actually figured that in terms of today's money, John D. Rockefeller was actually probably richer than Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos. Not just because his money was equal to or greater to theirs in value, but also the fact that he did not have a single competitor near his resources near the end of his life. And so he could just make things happen in a way that very few people were able to before or since single-handedly, which is where Jeff Bezos is now and where Elon Musk may be now, depending on what all he owns exactly that became worth so much more,
right,
or what all he bought.
It's just, like I said, it's just hard for me to, I would feel like basically betraying the entire human race to have that much money in my bank account while people were dying of easily solvable that I could personally wave a magic wand and solve. I don't know.
Well, so since he's so much richer, it's a good time to point out that not too long after it actually happened, he promised that he would make sure everyone in Flint had clean water. And Flint still doesn't have clean water.
And think about it. He would be like, it would go down in history. He'd be this huge hero. He would buy what guys like that seemingly want, right? Is to be seen as a savior.
He would be the greatest philanthropist savior to actually be praised in memory since Carnegie, who still has people licking his boots after he's been dead so long because of all the so-called good works done in his name.
They tore down his library here to make room for an office building, and then nobody ever used it.
Seems like they should have left the library.
Maybe, yeah.
So what's it like running for city council in Decatur, Illinois?
It sucks. I mean, that's the easiest way to put it. I feel like I'm probably the ultimate underdog candidate. I can't afford piles of yard signs. I can't do TV ads. I'm running on grassroots social media. I go to the meetings. I hope that people who care about the issues will see me at these meetings. I know I get a lot of DMs from people saying that they've seen me here. They're telling their friends about me. That's really the only way I can compete. And yet I'm being constantly targeted because I'm a public presence because I go into these meetings. No media outlet in town will even print my ballot name. And everybody else's ballot name was fine. They told me that they couldn't do it because it wasn't my legal name because I'm running as Mark Guillotine Guy Girdler. I got that legally approved. I got it certified. It's on the ballot. People have run here under nicknames, but they won't do it. A local right-wing media guy who prides himself on having every candidate has said he'll have no one on because it would mean giving everybody equal time. And I said tonight at the city council meeting, I said, I won't ask for equal time. At least let the other people talk. At least let other people be heard. I'm not going to punish 12 other people because this guy's scared to have me on his show. But it's really weird to run. I mean, there's a lot of people who, are really supportive of it. But then I'm running against a lot of people. Some of them do, but most of them don't have any platform. They don't have any kind of issues that they're talking about. They're completely nondescript people who just happen to, maybe they were an ex-cop or maybe they were an ex-tennis coach or they run a motel in town and that's it. They don't have any kind of ideology. They don't have any kind of platform. They've got nothing. They're just running because, hey, I can afford to put yard signs out.
Sounds like the future of the Democratic Party.
Even the Democratic Party won't help me here.
No, I know. That's what I mean. Is like those are the people that the Democratic Party would be helping. Is the folks who don't believe anything but have the money to put up yard signs.
Right.
I mean, and there's an argument to be made that your governor was elected because he could afford to put up yard signs.
For sure. Yeah. It's effective. I mean, I can't argue with that. But I feel like at a local level where one vote can really be the difference between whether we get military grade surveillance cameras in our neighborhoods or whether we supply our food pantries with cash, you should be looking at issues. These are things that will literally affect you on a daily, ongoing basis. And yeah, I wear short shorts on Facebook and I smoke a lot of weed, but that has no bearing on the fact that, I have a real platform. I've been building it for almost 2 years now. I mean, I don't have the deepest, I couldn't run for, Senate or something on my platform, but for local, I feel like I have a good platform, but people it's so difficult to get your name out, especially when you've got a media blackout. And they loved running stories of me when I was the crazy protester, and they loved putting my crazy signs on the news and doing stories about the guillotine guy. But now that I'm a viable candidate and stuff, it's like, oh, let's just let's just clamp down on this guy. And I mean, why? I've got to be a pretty big underdog. There's people with more money, more influence, but it's like, no, we're going to go after this guy.
I can sort of answer that question. I'm pretty sure it was rhetorical, but I can actually sort of answer it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
So there are two kinds of politicians: people who aren't in office yet and people who are. Now, people who aren't in office yet want to be in office. It doesn't matter whether for good reasons, for bad reasons, whatever. They want to be in office. And because they want to be in office, they are motivated. So candidates who aren't in office believe in things and they're motivated to run. Politicians who are in office, incumbents, let's say, especially, or people who have a comfortable place and are looking to upgrade, are scared. We already basically bemoaned the state of education and civics. We pointed out that many of your opponents have no platform. I jokingly said that was the future of the Democratic Party, but in actual fact, that's the present of the Democratic Party. Those are the people they run for Congress, for state office, for governor, whenever they can. People who don't really believe in much but have money. And then once they're in, they're scared of not being in anymore. And fear motivates them.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you can get them to do anything is by making them as more scared of you than they are of the people who stop them from doing anything. Now, one of the things that can generate a lot of fear in incumbents and rich people and, the status quo in general, don't ask me why, is the guillotine.
Yeah, that's why I picked it, to make my message perfectly clear. But I mean, they actually tell people that I'm going to behead people. And it's like, we don't have the city ordinances in place to do that. What are they talking about?
Well, but you have to remember that there were people who took the Project Veritas video that Bernie volunteered.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
No, I'm sorry, Iowa, who was drunk. You could tell he was drunk. And he's talking about, when we win, we're going to put these right-wingers in gulags. And that was such a big deal to some people.
Well, I don't want to interrupt you, but those videos came out right as I made some key speeches, and probably a little bit after I went to the city council and told them that I was tired of these boutique businesses opening downtown that were like vanity projects that we were propping up. I said, I'm going to build the first boutique gulag, and I'm going to put the city manager in it. And then those videos came out after that. And I mean, it was just like, oh, man.
Hey, well, maybe people will remember you now on election day.
They printed that in the paper that I was going to put the city manager in a gulag and build a big guillotine in Central Park, but now they don't want to talk about it.
Does the city manager or the mayor control the spending in your town?
I think it's the city manager makes heavy advisements, and I think under a certain amount he's allowed to make purchases unfettered, but then at a certain amount he has to run everything through them. But I mean, I don't know for sure what our median income is here, but I'm sure it can't be too much. It can't be that high. And he's making over $200,000 in total compensation. He's making more than, I think it was 49 out of 50 governors. So if we're paying him that much, hopefully he's got a little bit to say with it. He's one of the few people in town that wants to defund the fire department. You know how people always say you never hear anybody say F the fire department? Our city manager says F the fire department.
Wow. Now that really shows priorities when you're willing to put lives over business during a plague. But we need to defund that fire department, dang it.
Not only that, they wanted to shut down the fire department that serviced a huge portion of the lower income neighborhoods in Decatur. They wanted to completely shut it down during the pandemic.
Well, that's just mask off.
It got tabled, but I mean, what world do we live in where something like that even makes it onto the agenda?
Well, what world do we live in? Let's start there.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in a world We live in a world where the same government organizations that stepped up first to try to protect banks and big business under Hoover, and then to try to actually do something for people in the New Deal, or at least for some people. And regardless of what you think, the way that resources were mobilized and put to use, and laws and executive decisions were passed quickly or made quickly, and they totally fail to do anything now. They gave people one $1,200 check and one $600 check.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every other post-industrial or industrialized nation in the world has some sort of income support, but not here.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the so-called richest nation in the world, or what you might want, some people might call the seat of empire, however you want to decide to put it. We couldn't take care of people. We didn't have the political will to take care of people. We don't have the political will to give everybody health care. Now, one of the really popular things that folks online like to say is, well, every developed country has health care, just not us. Oh, I got worse news for you than that. It's not just developed countries. Samoa and Uruguay have free universal health care. If Samoa can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if in some cases that just means paying for the helicopter to New Zealand for the real hospital. If Samoa can do it, you would think we could.
Mm-hmm.
What are our resources compared to Samoa's?
Well, I think the whole argument that like libertarians make, which is who's going to pay for it, is kind of irrelevant now that we poured like tens of trillions of dollars into the economy and it just vanished, and we don't know what benefit we got from it.
I had a former congressman, Alan Grayson from Florida, on just before the Christmas holidays. And he and I did some math. The first day of when the news came out that the pandemic was going to be bad, when the stock market did start to crash, they burned $8 trillion in the stock market that day, and it still crashed. So take half of that, 4 trillion. I'm sorry, 4 billion. Sorry, 4 billion. But anyway, you take half of that, 4 billion. After that, all those big numbers are almost indistinguishable anyway. But $4 billion, you give every American a $20,000 check for half of what they burned up in one day, trying to stabilize markets that didn't stabilize for months.
Well, and we really don't. I mean, as far as I can see, we don't even really know any quantifiable impact that money had. I mean, how does it just disappear like that?
So well, that's the fun part. It never existed in the first place, but that's a whole other topic. But what happens is, and Congressman Grayson explained this as well, which is good to know. Of course, he has experience. He was in Congress when they passed TARP and stuff like that. So what happens is they buy not the foreclosures, not the foreclosed properties, but the debts that people are being foreclosed on for in the foreclosures market. So they're buying the right to foreclose on somebody. Now, when you do that, when you buy the right to foreclose on somebody, one of two things happens. You foreclose on them, you throw them out, you sell the property, and you make money. Or No, I'm sorry. Either they pay up and and everything is great and you make money, or you throw them out and sell the place and you make money, or you throw them out and nobody moves in and you lose money because now nobody's paying rent, nobody's paying the mortgage at all.
Right.
In the first two cases where somebody makes money, those assets go right back to the person who sold them to the government, and they get the profits.
Wow.
And they keep whatever the government paid them for it. So the second is, if they don't make money, the government ate it. So to answer your question of where that money went, into the bank accounts of the people who owned the mortgages, or rather the debts for the mortgages, to the banks, the rich people who invest in the banks. That's the money that made the rich people so much richer.
What a wise use of our money.
So, I mean, that's one way to look at it, is that's the money that made the rich people so much richer, that made Elon Musk the richest man in the world in the space of a few months, from 5 billion to 180 billion. It's like ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I still can't. I mean, it happened so fast. It's just like, I thought it was impossible that somebody would even catch up to to Amazon.
Well, Gates had caught up to Bezos for a little while after he had to give a bunch of money to his ex-wife.
Oh,
he got rich again.
Mm-hmm.
And he made it all back and was richer than Gates again. And now all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Elon Musk, who was way down the list, is past both of them. And it's like whiplash.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I normally pay attention, but these are the people who are making money off us getting sick and dying. And so now it's important to know who they are.
We have that too. I'm not even going to say it's to a lesser degree, because it still involves billions of dollars. But, we have the son of Warren Buffett here in town, Howard Buffett, and looking at some of Alan's research, it's become very clear that the Buffett family has profited greatly from the pandemic. And then they come back to our community and say, hey, we want to invest into your community. And people don't really pay attention to where even that money goes. So that's where we get the military grade equipment for the police. That's why poor neighborhoods have military grade surveillance. He made a big donation to our children's museum, and you think, well, how could that be bad? Well, he built basically an indoctrination center for law enforcement. His voice booms when you enter our children's museum, and you can get into a sheriff's SUV and a sheriff's helicopter. It's wild.
And of course, as I understand it, well, and we already commented on the fact that Governor Pritzker can afford a TV commercial or two. He's a billionaire. Mm-hmm. He's not one of the top 10, but he's a billionaire. He's got 5 or 6 billion himself, I think. Isn't he in business with the Buffett somehow? I can't remember.
From the research I've seen, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some connections there.
Yeah, which only makes sense to me. I mean, when you've got a handful of billionaires who own everything, it's only natural there be connections.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they're all going to have the best information on which sectors to move into at which times.
It's true. It's absolutely true. And they plan that stuff sometimes. There's a whole group of people in the Trump administration who used to be students of a professor and Republican think tank guy and Reagan advisor named John Tanton. And John Tanton's thing is, well, let all those poor people die somehow. And that'll solve a lot of our poverty problem. and a lot of other problems too. One of his proteges was a David Horowitz who helped sell the Iraq War for W. And David Horowitz's protege was Stephen Miller.
Oh boy.
So you've got literally a student once removed of a eugenicist in a key government position during a plague. What could go wrong?
Right. I think we saw what can go wrong.
This is not made to make you feel any worse, but on Biden's one of the designated appointees for Biden's Corona task force, Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, thinks people should die at 75.
Wow.
That's reassuring right now.
Though not really surprising that would be somebody on his task force, unfortunately.
Well, you think at least Biden would use some self-awareness. He's 78, remember?
Right. Is he going to go first, or how's it going to work?
But yeah, no, it's just obviously Biden considers himself one of the exceptions that Dr. Emanuel was talking about. But no, it's disappointing to see the cake fall, I guess is the best way to put it. The souffle collapse, maybe, is just all.
Oh, geez, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's just all. It feels like things are falling apart a little, and that nobody knows quite how to put them back together.
Or it seems just impossible to put them back together. How do you reconcile even like liberals with the right now, let alone have any kind of group unity that brings the left in? I just don't see it. I don't know how. I don't think Joe Biden can do it.
So unity is kind of a myth. Let's talk about the New Deal again, and let's really look at what FDR had to contend with. Now, he had a Democratic majority in the House, but the Democratic majority relied on really conservative Southern Democrats who were the equivalent of our Republicans now, to the point of hating the same people. He had urban trade unionists who really wanted serious action to help working people. And he had Wall Street interests that wanted him to save the economy. And he had to juggle all this stuff. And yet he still managed to do things to try to help people despite all that. And this Democratic House majority that couldn't reconcile itself was actually able to muster some fear that the system might collapse if they didn't do something. It's almost like people don't care if the system collapses right now, as long as they get their bit on the way out. Or maybe they even believe it's impossible that the system could collapse.
Right. I think at least for me, I kind of had to, even though I think it could collapse, I think I had to kind of convince myself for a little bit there that it couldn't, like just to have some kind of hope that, we could carry on as a society, because it got pretty, it's still bleak, but it was really some of the stuff that's being said and being done. It's just like, can the system hold this? And you just have to hope, like, when it comes down to it, it'll go the way it's gone every time, just with a little bit more craziness this time. At least for me, that's what I had to do.
No, and that's the only thing we can do is try to convince ourselves, okay, All we can do is get through this, and we're going to make it. And then that's all you can do is try to make it. I mean, and I guess a lot of us have the advantage or disadvantage of had to struggle to make it for a while in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I think the people who had been, many of the things that really bother people about being even in these lighter lockdowns are things that a lot of people deal with every single day. All the people that were denied access to working from home, or picking up. I mean, businesses are evolving and delivering groceries now, and you can do curbside pickup for a lot of stuff that makes life so much easier for people. We could have been doing it for them for years, and we didn't do it because we didn't have I don't know, the resources or the ability to it. But I mean, now there's no reason we can't all work from home at a lot of jobs. And
that's really why, if you think about it, that's really why there's so much resistance to taking care of people the way other countries have done, because that shows that we don't really need to live the way we do.
for sure, yeah.
Those other countries, whatever problems they have, they don't live the way we do. They tend to live better. I'm not saying it's perfect.
Right.
But other countries in the developed world, and even some that aren't so developed, people live better. You know, that on average, medieval peasants had more time off work than we do. More leisure time, more free time, more time to hang out and whatever.
Well, I'm not sure that it's a universal thing, but I mean, I've read a lot of studies where countries that shifted to lighter work schedules had increased productivity. Germany. So really, we're doing all this we're breaking our backs for no real reason, for no benefit for anybody.
Germany has a 30-hour work week, and they get paid the same as they got paid when they had a 40-hour work week. One of the defining demands of the IWW for years was a 20-hour work week for 40-hour pay. I think it's still one of their key demands. I could be wrong. So even it's no secret that we work too hard for too little return. And why work us so hard? Who benefits from that? Does it have something to do with why we're not all out in the streets on the same level that they are in France?
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, it's France where they had the Yellow Vest riots over policies that were in theory supposed to be for everyone's benefit, but which were essentially funded by the working class instead of the ownership class, and so just pissed people off. And they've been protesting ever since, and it's only gotten worse. And Macron has had to make concession after concession. And the closest anybody could come to that here was this misbegotten astroturfed attempt to lynch members of Congress for not doing their leader's will. And it's really disappointing. But I mean, again, these were folks who owned their own businesses or had rich people paying for them to go. And so it really shows you how our system works, even when it comes to supposed anti-establishment efforts. Well,
Right.
they're funded by the establishment.
The same group who cried all the time and swore that every Antifa protest globally was paid for by George Soros.
Still haven't gotten a Soros check.
I could use it too.
I've done. This is the 8th episode of this show. I did a show with a collaborator for at least a year. I'd never gotten any Soros money.
Maybe you can claim it on your taxes if you don't get it by the 15th.
Maybe I'll try that. But it's Clarence Thomas's wife was hiring buses for people. Let's see. You had a member of the Chamber of Delegates of West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned the son of the New York State Supreme Court Justice from Brooklyn.
The lady who took the private plane.
And yet Richard Wolff made the mistake of calling it a working class protest, and it's like, that's just not a good take, Professor Wolff. I'm sorry. I love your show, but that's not a good take.
Yep.
And it's so surreal that sort of astroturfed play populism feels like what we're capable of right now. Now, I know that that's not true. If you look at the scale, the Black Lives Matter protests were a much bigger deal. But they stopped talking about them for months. Even while they were still going on, you could follow people on Twitter who were reporting them, but not hear much about them at all on the actual news.
Yeah, my girlfriend's a pretty big liberal, so we watch a lot of CNN, and at a certain point, they just moved on. Even when there wasn't another big story to take its place, they just moved along.
Even when protests were still going on every morning or in DC, nobody was really covering them except independent media. Yeah, no, but they really, really put a lot of effort into making sure everyone knew about the Trump supporters' little riot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they loop the footage like every 10 minutes or something. You see the same 5 or 6 pictures.
And they keep saying the same thing: a coup, overthrow our democracy, a fascist takeover, the same language. Adam Schiff has a domestic terrorism bill he wants to pass, and Joe Biden says he thinks we need one. So we already have a Patriot Act. Now we get Domestic Patriot Act. And
it'll be certainly turned at not the leftists, I'm sure.
Well, here's where we are. So you had the original Patriot Act. Do you know what it was called when it was written?
Shoot, I remember this. I just looked at it. I can't remember now.
The Omnibus Counterterrorism Act of 1995. Right. You notice that last part. The Omnibus Counterterrorism Act of 1995, not 2001.
Mm-hmm.
So it was written in response to the Oklahoma City bombing, but it failed to pass until the Republicans changed its name and passed it after September 11th. So it was written because of white supremacists, but they couldn't even pass it through Congress because of white supremacists. Since it has passed, you please correct me if there's something that I have missed. I am unaware of the Patriot Act ever being used against white supremacists since it passed.
Yeah, I don't remember any like news stories highlighting it or anything.
No. Well, lots of attention to some of the things that have happened under the Patriot Act. They were talking about Guantanamo Bay all the time for a while, though you notice they don't really talk about Guantanamo much anymore either.
Mm-hmm.
And other things in the Patriot Act, they talk about them all the time, but you don't ever hear about the Patriot Act being used to take down white supremacists. At least I haven't. So when I hear domestic terrorism bill, and that they're trying to use Trump's name to scare people into letting them pass it, I just don't see them actually intending it for use against white supremacists.
Well, yeah, and I mean, just to me, it's common sense. I wouldn't expect them to. I think they would just mold it to target the people they want to target.
Exactly. I mean, the black vans that were up here in my neck of the woods in Portland and are back now, that's not a crime. That's legal under the Patriot Act. If you're designating the person that you're snatching as a terrorist, charging people with charging protesters at nonviolent events with federal terrorism charges, that's out of the Patriot Act. So they have used the Patriot Act against Black Lives Matter. And they want us to pass a domestic terrorism bill for Joe Biden.
It's pretty scary thought, I guess, when you really think about it. Because I know everybody I knew who was doing just peaceful protests in our little small towns in the Midwest, when they started taking people in vans, like it was like we got super paranoid, being like, do we know who that car that circled twice?
I know that Alan had a bicycle destroyed and was narrowly missed. I know people have been arrested. I have retweeted some of the bail fund requests. They really, really don't want people to stand up for themselves right now. And if you stand up for other people, you're evil.
Yeah. Pretty much, or an extremist, or, a lunatic or whatever. Like, I don't get it. I mean, there was a parade of people there tonight. I'm still like kind of in a state of shock over some of the stuff that I heard our elected officials say, to literally say that lives, had to come second to commerce. And, a city council, we had the health department was there actually, because we're thinking of dropping all COVID restrictions in Decatur. And, the health department got up, and I'm like, we're listening to a children's tennis coach instead of the health department. What's the deal with that? And I mean, they took great offense to that. I mean, and then somebody said, well, we can argue who the experts are. And I'm like, no, you can't. You can't argue who the experts are in medicine. Just because you played college basketball doesn't mean you know anything about a global pandemic. And that I can't point that out without being called evil is ridiculous to me.
It's like even Scott Atlas. He's a radiologist. If you need somebody to give you an MRI or a CAT scan, he's your guy, but he doesn't know anything about coronavirus.
Right.
He doesn't know anything about epidemiology or communicable diseases, at least nothing that he didn't learn in residency before he moved on to X-ray machines.
It's baffling to me why a group of citizens would come down, and of course they're the ones that want the restaurants reopened and the bars reopened here. And I mean, they sat and clapped whenever they said we shouldn't listen to the health department, that we don't, I mean, the guy said we don't know anything about COVID. It's like, no, we do. We know how it spreads. We know how to mitigate it. We've got multiple vaccines. I'd say we know a pretty good amount about COVID-19 by this point.
And even the one thing that was said disingenuously, but is sort of true, is sort of not true. It's like the flu. Even that it's like the flu shows a basic minimal level of knowledge where you can't go back and deny. You said it was like the flu. People catch the flu. People get really sick of the flu. People die of the flu. How can you say it's not serious if 60,000 people die of the flu every year? I don't think that's the right number, so don't quote me, anybody. But, and so now we're talking about, so it's like the flu, but it's more contagious. Not more fatal, but more contagious. So you're going to have more people die of it in whole numbers, even though they're a smaller percentage of the total number of people who get sick. And you're going to have more people get sick. And they still don't know how long some of these after effects last.
Yeah, I mean, I know people personally who are having I know one person who documents all of her symptoms every single day. We had a business owner here, I'm not going to say their name, but they traveled to Florida when Florida was the hottest state in the country, okay? They went to COVID, they went there. When they came back a few months later, they died. And I don't know if they're going to credit it to COVID or not, but I mean, he died from an aneurysm. And I mean, that's one of the main long haul symptoms of COVID. So how many people they saying that their people are cooking the numbers? I think they're cooking the numbers down, maybe.
It's possible because, I mean, remember there was a thing where they were finding out that people in hospitals were saying they didn't want the COVID numbers to look bad because that would make it look like they weren't doing their jobs. So if somebody died of COVID pneumonia, they said, so such and such died of pneumonia, not COVID. If somebody died of a stroke or a heart attack that was caused by the strain on their body of being on a respirator, they didn't die of COVID. They died of a stroke or a heart attack. That was what the lady who got fired in Florida for telling people the truth was saying.
You got her home rated.
Yeah. It just goes to show you how far our politicians will go when they have a personal grudge against somebody.
Yeah, that's great. For everybody that's running for office, there's something to keep in mind.
No, I mean, honestly, there's nothing better to keep it for everybody running for office to keep in mind right now. Not because I want to stop them, but because people need to know. They will do anything they can to wreck some people if they can figure out a way to do it, and they'll go through everybody's closet for any skeletons they can find, even vague, and they will make them up if they can't figure out the truth, because they'll figure no one else can figure out the truth either.
Yeah. Well, it's like tonight, all I did was literally repeat back to them what they said verbatim, that they said that it was a real tough call between human lives and commerce. And I mean, that was an attack to them. And I literally just said their words back to them. But to those people inside that building who wanted to hear what they said, they just ate it up. But it's like, how in the world can just repeating back your own words be construed as some kind of personal attack?
Because they haven't really considered what they're saying. They haven't really thought about what it means deep down. And when somebody else says it flat out back at them, they're like, no, how could you possibly think we could mean that? Well, you just said, no, that's evil.
Yeah. It's crazy to me. And it's happened to me so many times. And, it's just at a certain point, I just kind of have to accept the fact that they're just going to lie constantly. And, there's not much I can do about it other than call them out on it. And, they certainly don't like that.
If it makes you feel any better, it's not just local. Andrew Cuomo came out and said, we really can't have more shutdowns. We've got to start figuring out how to open up again smart and safe. You can say smart and safe all you want, but we know from what we know about COVID that opening up isn't safe or smart.
Mm-hmm.
But he's saying it anyway, and he's supposedly the Democrats' hero on the issue. I don't know.
Yeah, our local libertarian was quick to bring that up tonight at the council meeting, that even Andrew Cuomo doesn't want anybody shut down anymore. Thanks, Cuomo.
And Joe Biden was talking about, oh, no. We're probably going to need at least one more short shutdown when he was running. But after he was president-elect, his people start, no. We got to get schools open. We got to get schools open. So it's a joke in the book. But in the book and movie Emma, based on Jane Austen's novel, Emma's father says, "Why would you want children? They spread disease." And it's true. Nobody's ever as sick as a kindergarten teacher. And nobody's ever sick as often as a kindergarten teacher. And so even if kids can't catch it, we know they can spread it. And the kids who can catch it get it worse than grown-ups and have more potential, even if they don't have serious symptoms while they're sick, more potential of long-haul symptoms after. Plus, you're exposing all the kids to each other. You're exposing all the teachers to the kids. And now you're exposing all the families when the kids come back home to all the other kids' families and the teachers. Mm-hmm. That's how you spread pandemics.
Mm-hmm. Well, tonight, one of the issues was that, of course, it was all about choice. These same people who don't support abortion, who want to keep legal weed out of our town, but they're all, it's all about my body, my choice now. They were saying, if you don't want to go to the bar, don't go to the bar. And people tried to explain to them that, if you go to the bar and then just go home and stay home, that's okay. But don't go to the bar and then go to Walmart and infect people that are trying to be safe. They can't get it through their head. It's just baffling.
Well, it's because they don't think they have to care about other people. We have a society that, in the 70s and since, they've really been teaching people that it really is all about us. And the more economically comfortable you are, the more all about you it actually is. And with that in mind, you get things like rich people thinking poor people will think $600 is a lot of money because rich people don't understand poverty. And it's not baffling when you really drill down on it. It's what we've been programming into people.
Mm-hmm. I guess it's just hard for me to accept that. I guess it just comes down to, there's still that part of me that wants to think these people are not these irredeemable bureaucrats who don't,
So I did not say irredeemable, though it's possible. I don't like to write anybody off. But if they're redeemable, they're going to be redeemed after things change and not before.
Kind of like how the liberals have taken in George Bush in the Trump era.
And that's so depressing. Somebody was really excited yesterday or the day before because Colin Powell had quit the Republican Party. And it's like, well, maybe he should have done that before he went to the UN and told all those lies to help W start a war.
Mm-hmm.
Why quit now?
Right, like, is Mike Pence a hero because he pulled the ripcord at the absolute last second? No, of course not.
I decided not to do something I had no legal authority to do because I couldn't figure out how to do something I had no ability or power to do. Brave, Mike. Brave. Well, folks, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I want to thank you for your time, Mark. I enjoyed having you on. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure. Folks, don't forget to follow Mark at Guillotine Guy 1 on Twitter.
And the guillotine guy on TikTok.
And
if you like dumb videos.
Hey, obviously if they're watching us, they like dumb videos. So that's something we can rely on at least. With that said, everybody have a great night. You have a great night, Mark. I hope you win.
You too. Yeah, I hope I win. I hope you have a great night too, though.
I will. And
I was gonna say I hope you win too, but I don't know if you're running for anything. So
I'm not running for anything yet. Not yet. Maybe we'll see. People sometimes say that I should, and I think that it's just the thought of, well, I want somebody to make some sort of change, and this person sounds like they know what's going on, and those are exactly the people who should run instead of listening to people who think they know what's going on.
I wish that I had seen someone here who I looked at and said, this is the person that should run. I've waited for years for somebody to run that would even be, halfway amenable to the stuff I wanted to see. And eventually it's just like, man, this is never going to happen in this town. So I got to do it. And,
I'm glad you did. That's what we're here to support. So thanks for running, man.
Yep. Thanks for having me on. Since nobody in the media here will give me a platform, it's nice to have one for a change.
Well, hopefully we'll get a few people watching this. A candidate in Urbana got 2,000 views out of this, so maybe we'll get another 2,000 views.
That'd be awesome. Thanks again for having me on. I really do seriously appreciate it.
Absolutely my pleasure. Everybody have a good night now, and I'll tweet at you.